Hey, this is your host, Jakub Zajicek, and welcome to another episode of Real Talks with Jakub. And today I had a very interesting discussion. I invited Noa Ronen, and she is an author of book Beyond Leadership, Awareness to Awareness. And she shared some incredible insights from how managers and how leaders can bring the most out of themselves and out of their teams. And not only that, she also shared what it was like to move from Israel to New York without really knowing the language. And it was very tough for her because her language skills in Israel were one of her biggest strengths. And once she moved into New York, she sort of lost this power. And I interviewed her about what she did to actually regain the confidence, to talk with confidence, and to again become the best version of herself as well. Hey Noah, I'm so excited to have you here finally.
And I'm excited to be with you. I have my coffee. I have my, as you called it, my cleaning ingredients to join you.
For people who are just listening, we had a little chat before we started recording, and Noah has a bottle, and it's all blue, and on the first sight it really looked like the stuff you spray on your windows when you wanna clean them, but but no, it's water. I believe it's water. Anyway, no, we got connected through Jeffrey Biesecker from the Light Inside podcast, and I had a great discussion with him. How do you know him, by the way?
LinkedIn, the mystery of LinkedIn, right?
Mystery of LinkedIn.
Yeah. There is an amazing community of leaders on LinkedIn, and we just got connected. And I am in this adventure of being a podcast guest, and I get to know a lot of amazing people like you through this process, and I'm so excited. We kind of like knew each other before, Jakub, right? Again on LinkedIn, but Jeffrey helped us even deepening our connection.
So. Yeah, I mean, we connected on LinkedIn. I sent you a message and you totally ghosted me. You didn't reply. I was like, okay.
Yeah, me, horrible me.
No, it's fine. Yeah. Anyway, Noah, I want to hear a little bit about your background, because I think people just heard a couple of sentences from you right now and they can say that you're not from US.
Yeah, where are you from? I hear that question a few times a day, almost every day. I live in the US for 15 years. But originally I am from Israel. And I have to say that even when I speak on stage, I always start with that question, because I know in the mindset of people, and I do the same, we want to know where is that accent is from. So I like to put that away and just that we can have the conversation. So I'm originally from Israel. And 15 years ago, my husband and I moved with two little kids for a job opportunity in New York City. And 7 years ago, we moved to North Carolina. And really our conversation, it's because of that moment that didn't work as I expected with the relocation adventure. You know, you go for 2-3 years, and 15 years after, I am here doing something that is totally different than what I imagined when I was in my 20s. And that change didn't work as well for me as I thought it will.
What did you expect in your 20s that will happen?
So I remember going to an interview. So in Israel, I worked in human resources and training, and I actually started my training experience in the Israeli army. I was in the Israeli Navy because every person in Israel must go to the army when they are 18, when you are graduating from high school. So I had this amazing job in the Navy. I was actually somewhat of a leadership coach without that title. And I also took the soldiers on hiking trips. So it was amazing. I learned a lot about geography and history and geology, because Israel is full with that. And I also coached the officers how to stand in front of their soldiers and talk that their people will listen to them. So that's how I started my training experience, and I got a lot of train the trainer experience. And it was amazing, wonderful experience for me that is still with me today. And that's how I got into training in human resources and then change management consulting. And then this offer for my husband to move with the company. He was working in Israel to New York City. And I was actually torn because I was in a career transition, moving into human resources as a senior, and wasn't sure I wanted to make the move. But I said, well, I'm an executive. I have MBA. Things will be fine. I didn't think like right away. I wasn't that naive, but I thought like a few months and I will find a nice job and I will go back to my old life.
I mean,
But
at the end of
yeah,
the day, you had MBA, right? It means something, especially
I,
in Israel, I guess. It meant a lot.
for some people, I actually adore more my certification in coaching than my MBA, and I don't pay much attention to certificates.
Yes.
Not that I'm saying that there is anything bad about getting education, but today my perspective is a bit different. But I thought it just will give me the added value, that it will open more doors for me. And apparently it didn't, because my education was from Israel. My executive experience was from Israel, and human resources in Israel is very different than in the
I got
US.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you
So,
moved
yeah.
from Israel to New York because your husband got work opportunity there, and you said, okay, well, I will just manage to um, start working myself as well. But it didn't work out. Tell me what happened in that first month or 2 months when you arrived into New York. How did it feel? What were you doing? What was that roadblock that you hit?
So the roadblock wasn't really in the first, 2 months, because when you move as a family from one country to another, at the beginning there is one partner from the two that takes the load of helping the family to adjust. And with two very small kids, they were then 2 years old and 12 months. I had to make sure the family is creating some roots, or at least adapting to the change. So there is some transition. But I'm talking, it takes about, for people, until you get all the working paperwork, all that stuff, to get to the point where you can start looking for a job. It takes a few months. But I think my biggest obstacle was actually a, a, a mental block.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really anything about my experience or the story I was telling myself, but the mental block that I had. And still have, by the way, many times. And that's English. English, as we started the conversation, is not my first language. And for me, speaking, when I lived in Israel, that was my forte. I remember when I was in the playground, or as a young soldier, or sitting in a boardroom, 23, sitting in the boardroom with C-suite executives, VPs, CEOs, and I would always open my mouth, and I knew I was an influencer. I knew in me that I had that leader that influence people. There is that magical silence of people listening to me and mostly following me.
Yes.
And suddenly you move to a new country, and every time you open your mouth, you hear pardon, excuse me. And I suddenly felt as an handicapped, that my forte became my hurdle. And when you go with that mental block to interviews or anything you're trying to do, it goes with you. And I would say all the right things because I was in human resources. So I knew how to, let's say, play the game when you go to an interviews. So I would take the right actions. But there was that mean voice that was telling me, who do you think will hire you with this lousy English? I wouldn't hire you.
I think words and the contents of your sentences is just around 7% of the actual communication, right? Of actual
Exactly.
verbal communication. But so how did you work on it? Because this is so interesting topic because you have the experience, you were in the army, you were leading soldiers, you were executive. But then something like English holds you back. So what happened? So you actually overcame it.
And And that's actually why I'm saying I'm sharing this story, because many times, some people move with less, with English that is less good than mine, and they find a job. And I think this story is important because it took me a long time to let go of that story. And it wasn't an easy path for me. I
What do
did
you mean
all
by
the
story?
this story that my story was that English, I'm not good at English, and people will not hire me or work with me
I
or
get it.
find
Okay.
in any interest. So there was the story that I was telling myself all the time, and I walked with it, and I was stuck for a few years. And what actually helped me, and it's nothing that I can say now, then I can't say there was this step and the other step and the third step. But now when I look back, I know that what made that beginning of a shift for me was when I started blogging. Because blogging, if you think about it, it was about 12 years ago, was like podcasting today. And what happened is that I needed probably some creative outlets to process my emotions. And as you say, I always had that internal voice or belief, self-belief, that things will work out. I remember as a project manager, really taking care of really complicated projects in the corporate setting. And it was, like everything can fall apart. And I would tell my husband, it's fine, everything will work out. I know everything will work out. I'm not worried. And that was kind of like a sentence, my husband would always laugh at me when I would say that, but it walked with me everywhere. There was that internal feeling that things will work out. And suddenly I stopped saying that sentence. So in that space, I walk in the US and I ask myself, how come you, the doer, the get it done person, can't bring results? And that blogging experience was the first time I probably allowed myself to have an emotional outlet and process everything that was happening and sharing that in a very open way. And I wrote about being an Israeli mom in the US. So it allowed me to bring that very funny perspective into the writing, and people started connecting with me. And that's what started to make the shift for me when people reach out to me and said, we really like what you're talking about. We really like your perspective. And later on, will you coach us?
Wow, thank you. This is amazing story, Noah. Thank you very much for sharing it. It's quite unusual that you found your confidence in English, because the problem was, I believe, spoken English, right? When you
right.
But
later on, it was also writing, by the way.
Blog. But
Again,
but you started blogging, and that brought you that confidence because people started reaching out to you. They're interested in working with you. So did it really change did it really, what was it that important mindset shift when you saw people reaching out to you directly because of who you are and what you write, so they pretty much didn't care about how you speak?
Yeah, I think there was, and that's something I see today. I work as an executive coach and business coach, and I say that sometimes people come to me, if I can see them, if it's through the screen or if it's face to face, and they are gray. They lost all their color. Mm-hmm. They disconnected from who they were. And that even first conversation with them, you start seeing the colors coming back. And that was the experience I think I had. I stopped believing in myself. That woman that was able to be promoted and find results suddenly looks in the mirror and says to herself, how come you can't bring results? What happened to you? Mm-hmm. And those people who reach out to me and say, we believe in you. We believe that you are able to do something that you are still not able to see in yourself. And what was interesting, that it happened again and again and again since that blog experience. It started with the coaching, and I did start taking, I took coaching, got trained, certified, and started working. And I started working very, I didn't kind of like took a big leap. I started working with Israeli women in the US that were stuck like me until I went back to work with corporate. But then what was funny is that I joined the coaching association.
Yes.
And I was their program chair. And when I introduced the speakers, people came to me afterwards and say, "You're so funny and so inspiring. Where can we hear you speaking?" And I said, "Come on," with my English. They said, "No, we really want to, where are you speaking?" And that's where I found my confidence to speak in English, because I never had the confidence standing in front of audience, right? That was my forte. And then people come to me from that chapter and saying, "We want you to be the president. Will you nominate yourself?" And I said, "Seriously, from all the members in the chapter, you couldn't find one English speaker that can lead the chapter?" And they say, "We don't care about that. We want you to lead the chapter." And again, I speak on stage and people come to me and say, "Where is the book?" So that's when I wrote the book. So it was interesting that again and again, people kind of like shattered a light on me before I was going back to Jeffrey. They were able to, he talks about the light in us.
Yes,
so they were able to see the light in me before I was able to see it in myself.
Now, before we dive into your book, which I really want to hear everything about, you mentioned that you're executive coach, and I want to hear more like a business nitty-gritty. So who do you exactly help? Who are the people you are helping, and how you're helping them?
Yeah, so the people I work with are executives that work in corporate or big companies, small companies, and many of them are social leaders. So I like that aspect of the social leader, and at least my definition of social leader is someone that has a goal or a vision that is beyond the values, beyond the money. There are values engaged in the conversation. They talk from a place of purpose, of some people call it the why, and it comes within the aspect of the values of how can I create more for the culture of the organization or my community. So something like what you do, you help people find, be better with podcasts and find podcasts, but you do this podcast because you want to inspire people. So there is a bigger, and you also shared with me your purpose. So there is a bigger purpose for you beyond the money, for why you do what you do. And those are the people I work with. And many of them come because there is some obstacle that they are trying. And, I say they want to bring results their way. And I say that I encourage people to go against the norms, because where they get stuck is not really with the problem. Listen well, it's not really the problem, but with their solution. Many times we are stuck with a solution that gets in our way to get what we want. So for example, I can't be a good leader because I don't know to communicate like the manager that was before me. I'm not good at communication, therefore I can't be a good leader. You are stuck with a solution that your way of being a good leader is being a good communicator like the last one. That's not how you're going to move forward.
And it's similar, like you had your own story that you need to have perfect English to be successful in the US. And so is there actually any difference in solution and story? Because how you described it, it sounds to me pretty much the same.
That's really good. It might be that the solution is also a story that we are telling ourselves, but this is the perspective we're standing in, believing that this is the only solution to solve our problem. So it is engaged together. I totally agree with you. And when you have that perspective of this is how I'm supposed to solve it, and then you don't move.
And, so in more specific, when somebody reaches out to you because of your blog or your LinkedIn presence, what is usually the problem they approach you with? Like, hey, saying, Noah, I need to help with X. What is the X?
The X mostly is to be better. I know it sounds very vague, but it's to be better with something or see results that they don't see, or it's not consistent results.
Yes.
And that's very frustrating for them. So it's kind of like my story, how come I don't see results? And that's where I really work with them with the conscious leadership or the conscious work that I do. Many people talk about the mental blocks that we discussed today. And I have another layer, which I call the beyond leadership, which is the being energy. And I believe this is the big difference of how I work with my clients, beyond of saying, who said you have to do it this way? Let's do it your way. And kind of like push back on the social norms or the norms of how we're supposed to do things. Because many people come and say, I purchased that program, I took the 5 steps and nothing changed for me. And I believe there is the being energy. And what happened to me is that I was focusing, for example, on the doing, on the actions, but I didn't pay attention to my being energy. And what does it mean? The being energy contains our mindset, the thoughts, maybe fears or beliefs or self-limiting beliefs. They can be positive or negative, and the emotions. And they can help us go to the sky. If you think about athletes, right? Their being with the actions works really well when they win, and it gets in the way, the thoughts and emotions, when they don't, get the winning. So it's the same way with us. And many of us find it very easy to go to the actions and don't pay attention to the being energy that I call the force. It's a force that can help us or get in our way, and many times make us stuck. And if we go to an executive experience, other people can stop you.
Beyond leadership, from awareness to awareness, you actually helped me with a little bit with that transition because you said beyond leadership. So you were telling about force and other interesting thing like regarding to leadership and stories we are telling to ourselves. But tell me about the book. So if people want to go more in depth on this topic, can they find that in your new book?
Yes, the book engages a few of my stories and client stories, and it really it has 3 parts. The first part is the aware less, what we don't know that we don't know. And mostly it's hard for us to find our blind spots alone. I call it the deer effect. It's that moment when you drive and you're not aware that a deer will bump into your car. So you need to learn how to do, when we moved to North Carolina, I didn't realize that I need to drive differently because a deer might bump into my car until it happened.
And there are no deers in Israel.
There are in the desert, but not mostly in the areas where you drive every day. So I had to learn to drive differently. In New York City, you don't drive a lot, or mostly you will see rats. So that was a new way for me to learn how to drive and open my eyesight. So mostly in our life, we just drive until something bumps into our life and we realize we were not aware to that. It's very hard to find alone what we're not aware. So when people come to me, mostly it's because a deer bumped into their car, right? It's the conversation with your boss. It's that client that fires you. It's something that happens, your partner, a health situation. There are lots of different reasons why the deer bumps into your car. There are not a lot, but it happens once in a while when someone will come and says, I know I have that issue and I need to work on it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I just know I trigger people or I can get out of the situation. So that's the aware less.
That's a beautiful analogy with the deer. So just to recap the first part of the 3 awareness. Those are the blind spots we don't know that we don't know. Similar like you when you moved to Israel, to US.
Yeah, so one of the areas I'm talking about is really the doing and being. And we have tendencies, we have autopilots, we have way we think, the way we act, the way we behave. I love the behave because it really engages, right? The being and the doing. And we have different tendency of what we do and how we think and how we feel, and we are not aware to them. And most of us have the tendency to go to the actions because when we were little kids, we heard that. Be a good boy, go clean up your room. Be a good girl, go do your homework. Be a good student, right? So we hear that and we learn that actions are what we are rewarded for, what we are kind of like, we are good. So we get the rewards for, so we act. And we also see that people who act are being seen, right? When they do, they are being seen. I was the same. I always said, for my actions, people will promote me, they will see me. So that's where we focus, most of us. And it can also be situational, that you will be very in the doing in many areas and in your being in other areas.
Yes.
So the idea, it's not bad about, I'm a doer. There is nothing wrong with focusing on actions, unless we will not see results. But we need to learn how to pay attention to the being energy. What are the thoughts? What are the emotions that are happening there? When you see an email from a person, and just by seeing that email, you're triggered. Those are your thoughts and emotions. And your actions will be impacted by those thoughts and emotions, right?
And I think almost no one really stops and think about, okay, why am I feeling this way right now?
Yeah.
Why is that? And no, it's actually interesting because I noticed similar thing with myself when I receive a new review on Apple iTunes about my podcast. Even though that it's 5-star review, I have difficulties reading it. Like, it's difficult for me to open that review and read it. But now I know that I need to stop and really think about it. And speaking of reviews, guys, if you're listening, just post there a review. It would mean the world to me.
Yeah. And I would say, here is the deal. Why questions? It's part of the problem. Why questions don't serve us. So asking why am I not going to my emotions and my thoughts when I see my reviews will not serve you, because it's a self-deprecating, self-beating yourself. You beat yourself up of, why am I behaving this way? The problem with why questions, that they're very, very judgmental and not serving us. So what you can do is shift it to what questions, and pay attention, because what comes from curiosity. So what makes you not checking the reviews? It's different. You don't need to answer that. But there is a huge difference. And I can tell you, if people who listen have kids or cousins, whatever, remember, you all know that experience when a child does something they're not supposed to do. And what the parents ask them, why did you do that? They know in the question that it's bad. What they did is bad. From the question, right? Why did you do that? You know you were not supposed to do that, right? Does the child answers? Mostly not. They will just, look down.
Well, I don't know. I don't have experience yet.
Right? So, and even teenagers, if you ask a teenager, and now my little kids are teenagers, if you ask them, why did you do that? They will not answer. But if you ask the child, what made you do that? The answers I get from my clients when they go and experiment with that are hilarious, because right away we can sense that there is no judgment in the question, but exploration.
And also, what I think is very interesting about that, it sort of gives you like third-person perspective. It's not really about you, and it's about looking at yourself from the third person and thinking, okay, like almost observing why is it happening, which makes it easier to give like real answer.
And again, not why it's happening, what makes it happen. And sorry that I do that little correction, but when we learn to have this conversation with ourselves, and you get excited, can you notice how you were like, why am I doing that? And then when I said, what makes you? And it was like, oh, I really want to dive in and have a conversation with myself, or write something about that and explore with myself what's going on there. So it opens up the conversation rather than feeling condensed by it and then not want to reflect on that.
Yes.
And that's why I feel many people don't like to talk about emotions because it comes from the why that they always learned. But the conversations I invite into that place of paying attention is, let me explore what's going on there. Because yes, it's looking at the mirror and saying, why are you not able to do that, is not helping. I'm just beating myself up. But if I'm saying, what's going on, Noah? What's going on? And then I can say, you know what, maybe I'm afraid. Maybe I'm just afraid. I'm freaking afraid because I never lived in a different country and I don't know how to do that. And by the way, today I can say that I understand that it's not the lack of the vocabulary that I have in English, or the, or my ability to speak beautifully in Hebrew, my first language, that was enabling me to influence people, but actually my ability to connect with people. I have that ability that I learned with life, that I know how to connect with people when I talk, that creates the wanting to listening to me. So it wasn't the words I was using, the beautiful words I was using, but how I was doing that. And that's what I was missing in the story I was telling myself.
Now I can definitely see that. So let's move into the second part from Ever Less. Oh. What is the second part of your book?
So the second part is a fun one. It's Aware Mess. I think you will love that. So that's the part, I believe you live that. It's that part you're willing to experiment. So now you identified what are your tendencies, what are your blind spots in some areas. You got some ideas how, what's going on. And now you want to work on that, right? So I call that space Aware Mess. It's that messy space that we're trying to figure it out. Some people don't like the word messy. So I'm not talking about getting dirty. I'm talking about your willingness to experiment. And what's interesting, right now when we're talking, it's the COVID-19, and many of the people who are business owners would probably resonate with what I'm going to say. When we are in moments of survival, when the only two choices are living life or death, some of us will choose death, but most of us will choose life. And that means that you are willing to do everything that you wouldn't willing to do before. You're willing to experiment, you stop procrastinating, you stop perfecting, and you're saying, okay, I will try again and again and again until I figure it out.
Yes.
And that's why right now we started with LinkedIn. Why we see so many videos suddenly on LinkedIn, all the business owners that are willing to go there and experiment without things to be perfect. So that's a space where a lot of creativity shows up. And as I mentioned in the blog story, beyond that, when you are lost, I love when people come to me and say, I'm lost. I believe there is beauty in being lost. That's where we are willing to experiment. We are willing to try new things. And that's when we always, not always, we are willing to reach out to other people and ask for help. And so that's the awareness part, just trying to figure it out until you try a lot of things and are willing to try a lot of different things.
I really like the example you gave with business owners producing content on LinkedIn, which is not perfect, which makes me think, like, if we are actually going back to times how it was before COVID-19, because now all these business owners will discover that they actually can get results from LinkedIn, that they can connect with people and create genuine relationships with LinkedIn. So do you think that there is something in short, going back to normal after COVID?
I don't like the word, I go against the norm. So I don't like the word normal. And I believe it's also limiting ourselves. Because if I'm waiting for that normal, and that normal kind of I believe that in change, as in my story, it never looks as you think it's going to look like. Even if you planned everything, it's always going to look different. So I don't believe there is going to be a normal. There's going to be a new situation that we will need to adapt into. And my new situation might probably look different than your new situation.
Yes.
So my problem, if I can say, with the word normal is that it stops some people, because I am waiting for that normal to come back, and then I'm not taking actions right now, and I'm holding myself back. And that's in a way what I did with my fear. I was telling myself, when my fear will disappear, I will keep taking actions. And the pivotal moment was, no, you will have to walk with your fear. It will get smaller, and there will be moments that it will get bigger, but the fear will never go away.
Yes.
It will change.
Yes. So let's dive into the last part, which is, I believe, awareness. So we are on awareness, and now let's talk about the third one, awareness.
Yeah. So awareness, and then awareness. And awareness is really when you've kind of like figure out, you cross the bridge. Now you know what you didn't know. You know how to work on that. And this is where I talk about the illusion of awareness. That's really because, okay, we all kind of like understand, okay, I don't know something, I kind of like get messy with it if I'm willing to do that. And then I know, and I kind of like move to the other side. Here is where the illusion of awareness is happening. We always go back to awareness. We always go back to awareness. And
once you uncover everything, you will start uncovering all the new things you don't know. That's good.
Yes, so there is that first layer of the illusion of awareness is that I think that when I will know that everything will be perfect, but now I learned that there are new things that I didn't know, right? So there's always going to be something you will learn. It never stops. That's one layer. But the second layer is, let's say, I learned that with something I do, I trigger people. Okay, for example, I'm a control freak. Okay, so I learned how to control that, how to be better about myself, and not to control people and give them their space to do whatever it is. Okay, I moved to the other side. Mostly I'm there. But when we are stressed, overwhelmed, we go back to our old behaviors, even when we work on ourselves. And that's where I am wishing and hoping that there will be more conversation about that part of the illusion of awareness, because what happens is that people spend a ton of money on programs, and they go to conferences, and everyone tells them that they move and cross to the other side, and organizations spend money on training people to become better leaders, and then they go back to their own, to the regular life that their work and everything, and they try, and it works for a day or two, and then they go to back to that awareness behavior, right? To those old tendencies, to those old autopilots. But that's okay. That's what we don't tell people. We all do that. We all go back when we are stressed and overwhelmed. So the real deal is to learn how you are when you are aware less. So if I know that I go back to my old behaviors, becoming a victim, start seeing everyone as, bullying me, and I'm the victim of everyone. And that's the way I start talking to myself. So every time there is a situation and I'm stressed, I will go to my old way of thinking as a victim.
Yes.
The deal is to learn to see yourself there and say, hey, Noah, you started a victim conversation with yourself. Are you staying there in the awareness space, or are you going to bring yourself back to awareness and keep moving? Okay, you got your victim conversation, you got your English not good enough conversation, whatever it is that you're working on. You are the control freak right now. Okay, you got your moment in the awareness. Are you choosing, because now you're not on autopilot and you have no awareness that you're doing that. Now you know. Are you choosing to stay there, or are you choosing to move back? I can tell you that sometimes I'm telling myself, you know what? I need a few more minutes to sit here and be miserable and being a victim. I need that right now. And I'm choosing to stay there until I'm ready to move. So this is the thing I wish there will be more conversation about, because we feel so frustrated with ourselves that we're going back to old behaviors, and that's okay. That's okay.
No, I think that if we will be talking a little bit longer about awareness and awareness, people won't be actually needing to buy your book, which I want them to do. So yes. Noa, tell me where can people grab the book to learn more about these 3 phases and how to really move through them.
Yeah, so beyond leadership, from awareless to awareness, or just look for my name on Amazon. You can buy the printed option or the electronic, or if the electronic only, you can also find on Barnes & Noble. So Amazon and Barnes & Noble for only the electronic one.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and let me know what you think. There is all information how to connect with me also on my book. So feel free to keep the conversation after you read the book, or just put a picture of yours on social media with the book, having fun reading it.
That's amazing. Noa, where is the best place to reach you? I believe it's LinkedIn right now, isn't it?
I am a lot on LinkedIn, Instagram, but all social media is Noa R Coach, and Noa is spelled without an H because that's an Israeli name, one of the top names for baby girls in Israel.
Yes.
So it's NOAR Coach, or my website, noaronencoaching.com. Yeah.
Wonderful. Noa, thank you very much for coming to Real Talks with Jakub.
Thank you. It was fun. I appreciate that. Thank you for the conversation.
And guys, if you like the show, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, especially with people who are executives and leaders. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Apple iTunes, or maybe if you're listening on Spotify, and leave a review. I promise that I will read it. Noa, thank you very much again, and everybody, until next time.
Thank you.